I think it was yesterday. Welcome y'all to Black Art News. This is our second episode. As promised, the illustrious, the one and only Dr. Eric Kelly. He's the art guy. I'm just the guy.
Hey guys, what y'all don't know, I might be the art guy, but he's the information guy. And that's what's important. We're going to talk about inspiration, but more important, we're going to talk about information in art because a lot of times people forget that the information is the power. So he's the information guy, and I guess I am the art guy. Hey, information, how you doing today?
Within our crew, everyone calls me Jarvis, so that's my information name. That's supposed to be my computer name. I'm doing good, man. It's warm here in Philadelphia. I'm real thankful that what happened yesterday with in Brooklyn was not, no one died. They were seriously and critically injured. I feel like we dodged a bullet there. And something that we've been talking about for a long time about the pandemic is mental health and wellness. Mm-hmm. And, I've said this before at the end of every clubhouse room I do, that we have to keep our head on a swivel. We have to know our surroundings. We know where we're at. Not saying any of that could have stopped anything, not that, but just I want us as a community to be aware, to definitely tap in to your spidey senses and your intuition as a Black person.
Well, one of the things that I'm also happy is that they did find the guy pretty quickly.
Yes.
That's critical because when people start doing terroristic things, and I see it as a terror attack. People can say what they want to say, and the key is, just as you say, to keep your head on the swivel, to know what's going on around you. And I think a lot of times, because it is America the Beautiful, we take it for granted that everything's going to be all right. And we found out, not only in the art world, but in the world in particular, that everything when it comes to not just African American, but to people, it's not always going to be all right.
Exactly. And we're living in times where we have to be ultra vigilant because everything has been politicized. The fact you want to wash your hands or you want to wear a mask is making a political statement. We live in that time frame where we can't do things just because, that everything has a second, third, double meaning, and it shouldn't. That's not the way it should be. But unfortunately, that's what these circumstances have made people believe. So,
not only that, Martin, we have to look at our youth. And our youth live in a different world. They live in a world of right now. And what happens when people are living in a world of right now, they're not living in a world of what the future is. And then when they're not standing on the shoulders of their past because they want everything right now, then they get comfortable. And that's kind of what, the day in Brooklyn was all about. We can talk about all the ways that the person who committed the act could have gotten away. Just small things he could have done to get away. Fortunate for everybody, he didn't use some of those things to get away. But if we're watching and paying attention to our fellow human beings, as opposed to worrying about our fellow selves, then some of the things that happen to us may not happen. I didn't say could not happen or would not happen, but may not happen because one of the people said that person was sitting right beside the guy before he committed the offense.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm sitting beside you, Martin, I'm just talking about me. I'm talking about nobody else. If I'm sitting beside you, I know everything that's going on with you. I may not act like it, but I feel it's my obligation to know what's going around in my surroundings. And I think with the right now attitude and I deserve it, and what they call Generation Alpha. And Generation Alpha is that all about me. And so we got to begin to look at those kinds of things because we're leading the youth. And sometimes our leadership is leading them to believe that we don't care. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, those are interesting points. We'll have to take this up at a different show. Because my daughter is Generation Alpha and she's 6 months, so I got what you're saying. But I will say to what you're saying, one of the troubling factors at turning 50 is that I see more 50-year-olds acting like millennials, and that's always been a thing. We make fun of men.
Mm-hmm.
Would drive sports cars in the 80s and try to relive their youth. They say they have midlife crisis. That used to be a term that everybody, used. Even we had Tom Selleck on Magnum PI. He looked like one of those guys, he was a the character was ex-veteran, and he was walking around in shorts and living in Hawaii and driving a Lamborghini or Ferrari. And so that concept of you can recapture your youth in that young, unfortunately, what every generation considers to be the tenets of them being young, to your point, there are some things that inherently, because of that generation, it doesn't lend itself to building community. And so I hear what you're saying. I also think, as a former New Yorker from 1990 to 2016, 100%, whenever the person's feet will leave to move to go to the door, I am observing their feet. I'm observing, someone else, I was in a room last night on Clubhouse and someone said, I can't sleep on a train. Other people said I can. And I was like that person. Every door opening, every stop, who got on, when they get off, all that type of stuff. I feel like that's part of our training in South Carolina, being from North Carolina and not from South Carolina. But training that teaches us to, because we're in the fields in North Carolina, we're an agricultural state, and that required you to get up very early in the morning, about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you had to feed the chickens, and some of your day was spent observing the space at the end of the road from your property to make sure no animal got onto the property, ate the plants, or ate the crop, or killed your chickens. So the details in North Carolina are wide and large. In a city like New York, the details, or Philadelphia, is right there. It's so much easier to be observant in a city than it was in the country.
Well, I used to go to New York in the summer, and I will never forget. I was listening to the radio, and one day I went outside, and I just went down. I'm a kid. I just went outside, and my uncle was looking for me. I didn't know he was looking for me, and when he finally found me, I was playing ball, and he came over. He said, "Come on with me," and my uncle took me upstairs, and he sat me down. And he said, "Let me tell you something." He said, 1 in 5 people are not going to come home in New York City. 1 in 5. He said 1 in 5 are not going to come home. He said, and it's my responsibility to make sure that you're not that 1 in 5. In my mind, I didn't get it, but in the country, in North Carolina, because North Carolina is wide, and your friends are closer, And when you talk about being on the train or being in a situation, I remember Katrina. Many people don't know this, but I was evacuated out of Katrina, and me and the entertainer that I was working for, doing all this media for, we was in a car, and we had to stop at a hotel. We couldn't get a hotel, so we had to sleep in the car. He went to sleep in the car. I couldn't go to sleep, because in my mindset was, at any point, any time, something could happen. And I think that comes from being someone from North Carolina. That's not to say people in New York are not conscious. It's more, you got so many numbers. Because if you think about it, and I know we're going to go to our show, but if you think about it, this guy could have threw the canister, could have shot, could have ran out, threw the mask into his back case, and just walked down the street. Didn't need a U-Haul at all. He didn't even need a U-Haul at all. Could have had everything in his backpack, So people don't even get that part. They just thinking, okay, it's another day. And then with the whole emergence of everybody coming out because of COVID, now you're thinking, we're getting back to normal. But the question really should be always, what really is normal? And when you do your Black news telecast and you always end it with, keep your head on a swivel, that is one of the things that I believe that you should always do. Even when I walk out my door, I go straight to the window, I look outside, and then I go outside. When I'm at someone's house, I never open up their door. And I tell them, I say, this is not my door. If something should happen, you need to open your door. Because if I open your door and something happens, guess what it seems like? I'm in cahoots with what's going on and what may happen. And so those are just some of the things. But I know we're here for Black Art today. And of course, it's going to be a great, want to welcome everybody to the show. We want you to know that this is more than just art. This is life. And when we bring you the information, we want to inspire you also as artists. And we want all the artists to understand one thing. Art is your opinion. Art is your opinion, artist. It's not nobody else's opinion but yours. Treat it like it's your opinion, and then you don't have to worry about how people feel about your work. Many people get into it and they say, oh, you can draw better than this guy, or you can draw better than that guy. No. When you are creating and you're a creator and you're creating something from nothing, that is your creation. That is not his creation, her creation, or somebody else's creation. It's your creation. So treat it like it's your opinion and your creation, and then you don't fall into the what I call the veins of looking like someone else. And the reason I brought that up is because if you're in a place like Durham, North Carolina, okay, and the handwriting is on the wall. The most famous artist in Durham was Ernie Barnes. So as a young artist, even though you may not even notice it, you still feel that strength and that power and that presence of what he's done before you. And even when you see his work, subconsciously, you're saying, well, I don't want to be another Ernie Barnes. We already have one. Okay. And then if you're a learned guy, you're going to go out and look at all of the artists all over the world. And then most real artists, and I'm only saying real, and what I mean by real, that is my definition is the person who knows that they're an artist and keep doing it in spite of money. We have many artists who have changed and they're doing it for money, but in spite of money, it's a part of what you have to do every day. That's what I call a real artist. And I'm not saying that artists who do it part-time are not real artists. I'm only saying, how can you do part-time something that's your destiny to do all the time?
Right. Yeah, I get. I mean, I can't argue with that. That's excellent, and that's something that that's a good point to keep in mind. Opinions. To me, art is very subjective. What you may like, I may not like. What you may find valuable, I may not. So I think that those type of connections to understanding that the subjection or being subjective and looking at art in a subjective light, to your point, helps the artist, but also helps the patron of art to, I think we're in an infancy stage within the Black community. I don't think we've gotten to a mature art appreciation stage yet. I think we're very much in, the infancies. I think we're still at, 6 months old. I don't think we've gotten to a 1-year-old toddler phase of being in art, because I just don't know that, I don't know that we actually define art and the way that other communities define art. I think that we have traditionally said, if you dance, if you do spoken word, if you, we don't talk about fine art and separate fine art away from art. But go ahead.
And one of the challenges that we have is that our parents push our kids away from art. And sometimes our parents put our kids in a space of what they want them to do or what they see them becoming, and you've heard me talk about what I call pushing our kids toward being athletes and entertainers, and then listening to the narrative that pushes them toward being rappers and criminals. And I talk about that, but a lot of times we don't talk about, does the parent really understand what art is? Or do the parent ever ask the child, what do the child want to do? We saw in the pandemic that now there are kids who are doing art and kids who are doing some other things with their time. Their parents didn't even know they had that skill or wanted to do it. Well, some of that is because we are in and I don't want to call it an infant state. I want to call it a state of our community is being our art community is being utilized by other communities to rip away all of the great works and begin to put different people on pedestals so that folk who are really active artists, that are living through it, don't get opportunity. As we begin to talk about news today, I can begin to talk about a show that's going on right now, and it has a star-studded name of some great artists. And the question becomes, do we only choose these guys to be the force and the voice of art? That's why I wanted to bring up the Ernie Barnes piece and talk about it, and then talk about Charles White, Romero Bearden, and these guys. All of these guys had different voices. And one of the things that we do not hear of even today, we don't have museums named after our Black artists. We have museums that are cultural centers. And we have so many cultural centers, this cultural center, that cultural center. But when you look at other nationalities artists, the Van Gogh Museum, the Picasso Museum. Then you have your guy, not Basquiat, but the guy that was with Basquiat. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head.
Andy Warhol.
Andy Warhol has 2 museums. Okay, where is Ernie Barnes Museum? We can say in the 20th century, one of the greatest artists that ever lived, that transformed art, not just in the Black community, in period. Where is his museum? Where is Charles White's museum? Where is Romero Bearden's museum?
Mm-hmm.
Where is Mark Bradford's? And he's a living artist who's the most expensive paid artist on the planet today, doing pieces where he's getting $12 million a piece, and he's still alive. Where is his museum? Okay.
Right.
The reason I'm saying it is, if we're going to be leaders in art, we can't lead by just talking about it. We got to share that information with our kids so they can actually see where they're going. Where's the Kende Wiley's museum? He just did Barack Obama. He's doing pieces for $250,000, $500,000. Our kids don't understand. And I'm in that same vein. I didn't understand the method of going through the process of becoming a great artist. Okay. All I understood was I'm an artist, but because I was raised in a particular way of not giving your work away, and because my great grandfather started a museum for me when I was 7 and taught me the value of value and the value of your time. It's the only reason I was able to survive is because I had to do another job instead of doing the job.
Gotcha. Well, I tell you, I'm excited to get to some of these headlines today and let folks know about some things that are happening in the art world. Let me see, the best way to give it to you is probably going to be in our private chat. So let me give you that. So I was, as I was going through BLKArtNews, I saw this article and I was like, oh my God, I know her. And she is a consummate community organizer and a patron of the arts. Sister Combo, she also was a city council person for New York from Fort Greene, Brooklyn. I've worked with her campaign in the past, and she helped save I think I want to call it, I believe it's a Paul Robeson Theater in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, or it might be a different name. But this was a theater that was going to be tore down. It was a beautiful building, and she helped rally the community and save that. She was just appointed the commissioner of the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, which oversees art and cultural funding for nonprofits across the five boroughs. Their budget is down from 213 million for 2022 to 145, but that's still she's in charge of $100 million budget. Even if they cut it by 35%, it's still 100 million for five sections of a city is still that sister. When you look at what she's done, I mean, I can make this bigger so people on the what's the name can see. Where's the plus sign at? Here we go. Let me make it bigger so everybody can see it on their screen. My bad, y'all. I forget that y'all watching us through the screen. So this is where I'm looking. This is where we're looking at. Eric Adams, Mayor Eric Adams, appointed her, and they and her budget rivals the federal government's national endowment for arts funding for the entire country, because President Biden budget request is 203 million for all of the U.S. So it's a combo.
But New York has a tremendous amount of artists, and when you begin to talk about this budget and talk about the artists that are going to be affected, the question that most people have who are not living in New York City is who are going to be the artists that get those type of grants. And it's great to see that we have someone who is in place to at least look at it. I don't know who's going to do the percentage, because again, that's what it boils down to. You can't just sit there and say, okay, New York, 213 million, and black people are going to get what? 2%, 3%, 12%. What is that number? And I think that's one of the things that we must begin to look at, because what happens is, when you look at the population, you got to deal with the population of New York. What is the population of New York?
Right. But well, here's the thing too, brother, Dr. Kelly, is that to your point about who's getting what, unfortunately, and I personally know Lori, she is the last person to have any kind of negative sentiment towards another community, whether it's Jewish or whether it's Asian American. But unfortunately, some of her remarks were misconstrued and taken that way. And she literally is not the sister that's out there saying, I'm blackity, blackity, black. We're on BLKArtNews, right? We're on LinkedIn on BLKArtNews. So I don't know that Sister Combo, I could get her to come on our show. I think I can, but she might be like, Martin, no, I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that's how her position politically, she's always been that person. Not since always. Once she became a city council person. Before that, she was in the streets. And so I think that she had also just recently had a baby last 4 years ago, I believe. And, all that changes you. And I think she got to a place where she, was just riffing one day and said some things. In New York, you have to be, if you're at a certain level, you always have to be cognitive of coming for the underserved without saying, I'm coming for the black underserved. And she said what she said. And so to my point to you is that you're right. And she has to always now, it says in an article that over the course of her career, some of her remarks and political positions have drawn negative media and been viewed as controversial by immigrant advocates and the Jews and the Asian American communities. Well, concerns that resurfaced that when her appointment was imminent, I mean, they couldn't do anything about it, but she's going to get it. So she's going to have to make sure she evenly distributes it. And with that said, I do, that, we have a certain amount of time for the show. So I'm going to move on to something that I wasn't going to talk about it, but since you brought this up, I want to get your opinion on this. Right below this article is something that's happening in Baltimore. The Andrew Mellon Foundation is providing $1.25 million to support the Black Baltimore Digital Database, BBBDD, a project founded by artist Derek Adams. The 2-year grant is fiscally sponsored by the UB Blake National Jazz Institute and Cultural Center. So I thought it was interesting. I love UB Blake, and when you said that about Black artists, I was like, there's got to be a building. And then I thought about it. I saw this article. I was like, well, there is a building. I mean, there's several, but what they are is for music. They're not.
They
for
are
a
culture.
program
They are
or sculpture.
culture centers, and I want to dissect that word for a minute for the audience. How I see cultural centers. We keep pushing back on great Black artists. Now, this was, let's just say, if it was, and I'm gonna use Ernie Barnes because it looks like somebody is putting something on the walls that looks similar to an Ernie Barnes piece. If this was in Ernie Barnes Museum, then merchandise could be sold. You see what I'm saying? Then Ernie Barnes legacy can be sold. And that's when you say cultural center, now you put it in the framework of culture. Okay, you don't put it in the framework really of business and art. And that's a museum. A museum is a business. And what many people don't understand, if you go to the Met in New York City and walk through their halls, you will notice one thing, that they have it broken down to each area of the world in the Met.
Yep.
Then you go to the store and you're able to buy each area of the world in their store.
Yep.
Okay. This was not a culture center, and it was an Ernie Barnes Center. Then what we will be able to do is not only go in and buy merchandise, but go in and learn about the legacy of the man, so that young people who were looking to be artists could really see what it means. Because you can't think about it, Martin. Looking at the cultural center right now, it does not say I can be an artist.
Right.
And that's the challenge.
Got it. Got it. That said, I also think that within our community, music is, put on a pedestal over sculpting and physical creation of art in many other forms. I even want to say, music and dance are put over, and so we got to almost reinvigorate our community to know, hey, there's other art besides those two things. Our next article is from artnews.com, and this is something I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to see what you thought last week. So an LA booksellers archive of Black artists has been acquired by Getty. And the interesting part of this is that the Getty Research Institute acquired the private collection of Lee Kaplan, a local bookseller who amassed a significant archive of eclectic published material on Black artists. And according to Getty, his collection numbers some 3,500 objects, including exhibition posters, pamphlets, monographs, Black-led art publications dating from 1930s to today. So what they're going to do is they're supposed to have this out there for anybody to see with a partnership at the Smithsonian. And that goes back to what I was going to say. I was trying to find the piece that said it about the Smithsonian, but that goes back to what you were saying. I have my own issue with us having to go to the Smithsonian to see our work.
To see our culture.
Right.
To see, I mean, think about it for a moment. Okay, now, why would the Getty Museum, first of all, buy the information? Okay, let's talk business for a moment. Okay, let's say that the Getty has this information out there for people to see. And the gentleman or whoever sold it to them, that's what they're thinking about their intentions is, right? Okay, let's fast forward 20 years from now. We fast forward 20 years from now. What would the Getty be able to do with this material, this raw material they have? They'll be able to sell the images. That lies the business part of what just happened. Who controls our culture right now? The Smithsonian and the Getty. Okay, why we don't control our culture? Well, one of the issues may be we don't understand how powerful our culture is. And then number two is we as Black people, even with that $1.5 trillion that we have, don't understand how to put ourselves in the same position that these guys put themselves in. Because, you know, at the end of the day, Getty didn't acquire it just to have. They acquired it so that they could use it. And what is use? Use is business. And I think we should think about that more.
I agree with you 100%, Doc. That's why I wanted to partner with you on this show. So our next article is coming from Cultural Type, and this talks about the news that popped off last week. But I did want to get your thought process and always give our sisters a shine. This, in the image we're seeing, her name is Nancy Lane, and she is the one of the longest running board members at Studio Museum in Harlem, and she is considered the reason why that institution was even created. She passed on March 28th, and I did not realize they started that organization in '73. And I remember when the Studio Museum in Harlem building was being built. I lived in Harlem at that time, and what's interesting to me about the storyline is that I don't think I've ever. I'm trying to remember. I've been at 4 or 5 major private events at the museum. I don't think that she's ever been kind of like toted out and say, "Hey, this is our biggest donor, biggest patron." Whereas if I went to your point, the Met, or to anywhere, that patron who is the biggest donor, you see them everywhere. And I think I want to get your sense on this, because when I felt some kind of way that I didn't know that she existed, in the sense of, and I haven't been part. I left New York in 2016, so maybe in the last 5 years things change, but the 3 or 4 events I went to that were there, and I say 4 because one was like I was in and out. I wasn't there for the whole thing. They never, the board trustees, you never really hear about them. I think as Black institution leaders, we have to switch the narrative of kind of hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then once we're gone, then it's like, oh, so-and-so was so great. Yeah, well, I would love to have sat down with her and did an interview. But what was it like in '73 establishing this board? What was it like? How did you feel when you first saw the building? A building is a beautiful building. I mean, when they created it was a beautiful building. I haven't seen the building in some time, but it was a very unique, forward-thinking building for that time, for 125th Street. So I'd love to have asked her, what did you think when you saw that building come up the way and exactly to the architect's specifications? It's very intentional building for art. So anyway, I think that trustees need to step forward. We need to stop pushing our people to the back, and ourselves stop being in the background.
Well, this is my opinion to that. This is one of the things that I find a lot of times that when I talk about the narrative, what is the narrative in the Black community? A lot of times the narrative in the Black community is not to step forward, not to be known. The narrative is a lot of times, let's let the art be known. Let's let the builder be known in the Black community. But in the white community, when you go to the Broad in Los Angeles, okay, you're going to know who built that museum. The museum in Harlem, they just tore it down, and they're building a new building there now. Okay. We know about the architect who's working on it, because Thelma Golden's
Mm-hmm.
husband is the architect. Okay, we know about No shade on that. There's no shade on that. But he is
Not,
actually,
not intentionally. Not intentionally.
but
I
we
love it
know
though.
that. But we know that. The question becomes, when we don't know who this lady is, we lose a significant amount of history in terms of her flavor, her thought process, and sharing that information with people across barriers. That is the piece that many people keep forgetting. It's kind of like most artists out here. You know, I was watching a panel last night about art, and during that panel, one of the guys was saying there are no spaces for our young artists to actually do art. And so that's the same thing. There is no space for our young people to know that she exists. And if she doesn't exist in our community, how does another Thelma Gooden Gordon become who she is?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did, and I want to share that with you. I did about 5 years ago. I updated it this year. I went out and did some research on all of the Black curators all over the world. And in that document that I did, it has every curator who's doing something all over the world. And I thought it was important to know who these people are. Because if
Right.
you're in the business, it's kind of like you're a mechanic. If you're a mechanic, you need to know how to change oil. If you're a
Right.
mechanic, you know how to deal with the engine when the engine breaks down. You need to know how to drive the car. If you're in the art business and you don't know who this lady is before she passes, then you're missing out on a building block of your art history. And when you start talking about that, there was a lady, Pamela. What is Pamela's last name? I can't think of Pamela. I'll think about it as we move on. Pamela and her husband, who did a art tour on Black artists, and her whole deal was Pamela Joyner. Her whole deal was she wanted to share the art canon of African American artists all over the world. Now, why is it that it took that this? I believe this tour was done about 2 years ago. Okay, David Driscoll did the last one, which was 200 Centuries of African American Art, right? So why is it in 2020 we're just getting people to say that the art canon is filled with Black artists that you don't know? And if it's not, and she's wealthy, if it's not in her, if she's not an art collector, then guess what? People who are not art collectors don't know these artists.
Right. Yep. I'm 100% with you. 100% with you. And I think that we got a long way. That's the reason for the show. We got a long way to go when it comes to Black art and to the conversation around art. And of course, what that looks like in real life. You know, this is one of the articles we're going to next. The city could stamp stretch of Imperial Avenue in Cantino, I think that's how you say that, as San Diego's Black Art and Cultural District. So the concept is they want to designate an 8-block stretch of an avenue, a major avenue in San Diego, as the San Diego Black Arts and Cultural District. I think that is huge. I don't know of another intentional space except for maybe Harlem. There was supposed to be something in Atlanta. There is a art Basel type of, there used to be at least an event that happened in Atlanta, but that wasn't that's those blocks weren't designated as a cultural district. And then you have where the Martin Luther King Memorial is at on dang it, what's on sorry, I can't even think of the name of the street. Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. That hasn't been designated as a district intentionally. It sort of is just because. But this distinction on the West Coast, I don't know any spot on the West Coast that is, I mean, I'm sure that Oakland has probably some things, but this could be very huge. And to your whole point, we haven't as a Black community, to me, haven't seen the intentionality with what you said earlier about creating institutions. But even outside of the institution, I'm in a city of murals. There are so many murals in this city of Philadelphia. I believe we have the largest collection of murals in the United States, in this city, on outside buildings and stuff. And when you do a walking tour of the murals, currently there's a Black sister that does something called Philly Experiences. But there's 5 now other companies that do walking tours, none of them Black, do the Black neighborhoods to show off the murals that are on our walls. And we're not thinking of, not, go ahead.
Let me cut across you on the mural deal. Okay. I but I want to say about this San Diego piece, I think it's awesome. I think we need more of it. I think the only question I have is who owns the stretch of land there and who's gonna reap the benefits.
That's a really, really good point.
Of the business that's gonna come through there, and why are they doing it? I'm just that guy. I always ask that question. Okay, you giving me a whole district. Okay, are you saying that this is the only district in the city, but this is a targeted district for people to come, and who actually earns the money? But the mural deal, while I like murals and I think murals are great, I'm one of the guys who really don't do murals. And some people would say, with Dr. Kelly, you still art. No, my challenge with doing murals is this: they don't last. You can't go, 150 years from now, you're going to paint over them. I wish there was a way that somebody would create a apparatus that would be attached to these buildings that you could actually paint on them, and those things could be stored for thousands of years. Because if you think about it, Black Lives Matter. Everybody walk through these cities and put Black Lives Matters all up on the buildings and bust windows out and the whole 9 yards. And then 30 days later, the buildings were looking cleaner than they were before everybody walked out. Same with our art. And it kind of, when you're just doing art and you photographing it, that is a way to keep the art. But ask yourself one question: what about the physical art? And that's my thing with murals. I was asked to do a mural. I was not excited. They wanted to pay me $3,000. I was not excited. My painting started 10 grand. Okay, but you want me to do a whole mural on a wall, and you're gonna tell me you're gonna pay me $3,000. Well, what I am putting on this wall is my soul. What I'm putting on this wall is my ability. What I am putting on this wall is how I feel. But what you really are doing when I take or accept a $3,000 figure for a mural on a wall, let's just say 2,000 square feet, what am I really doing to my art practice? I am degrading my work. My price of my work goes down, because how can I charge you a small piece of canvas $5,000 or $6,000, and then I do a whole big wall and all I'm charging is $3,000? And I think that is a challenge that artists have to start dealing with. Many artists don't look at their ability as the ability. They look at their ability as a gift. But no matter what gift you have, Martin, you have to cultivate that gift. You have to work at that gift, and you have to turn that gift into something that people will buy.
Gold.
And many artists don't even understand they are actually the goose, and their art is the golden egg. Which one do you want? You want to kill the goose, or you want the eggs? Everybody wants the eggs because the goose can continue to do it. My son is a rapper, and so we was having this conversation. He's 20 years younger than me, and he was complaining about, he's done all this music and he don't want to put that music out there because somebody might steal it or somebody might do something to it. And I looked him in his face and said, Justin, can't you do more music? Even if they take all the music that you put out there, can't you create more music? And you know what he said? He said, I never thought about it that way. I said, that's what happens with many artists. They do a nice, great piece, they get paid for it, and then the next thing you know, they're afraid to ask for what it costs them to do the work. You bow for all
Yep.
my if you bow for all my work today, I'll be able to pull my paintbrush out and create something else.
But now, what you're saying, though, on the other side of that, you're saying that, and I totally agree with you that $3,000 one is too low to pay for a mural on the outside of a building. So I don't like that. That's the prices I know that are paid here, and trying to think where my brother is at. He's in St. Louis, are at least 15K and above. So that's a difference. We actually have a grant for mural artists here in Philadelphia that's it goes from 15 to 25.
That's my
So
point.
3,000 is too much. But now, to your point you just made about your son, is some would say that same point could be applied to murals. If you want to decide to do it, and it's up there for all to see. And you just paint another canvas? Can't you just, like what you just said, can be applied? So I think that, to going back to your original statement when you first started talking about art, I think it's everybody's opinion, and I think it's subjective to what I think artists should definitely be looking at is just like I tell, talk to jazz musicians all the time that are young. I said, you're not always going to be able to blow that horn. So when you're 65 years old, what's going to help you get through the day? And if you need to, you might have carpal tunnel or what have you. You may need CBD. CBD ain't cheap, and you may need some 420. That ain't cheap either. So you and right, an accident. What's your retirement plan? And so, well, and most of them, will say, I'm gonna live off the royalties from this album that I'm doing with so and so, or this soundtrack I'm doing. They have a strategy and a plan in their head. But I think, to your point, as this is an opinion, this is not, nobody's. This is my personal opinion. Artists need to look at what's going to bring the most significant, life-changing opportunity to their feet, and then take that opportunity, learn from it, try to bring others back to that opportunity. Next year, you have another person. It might be an art fellowship, it might be a residency, but create a whole legacy of turning other people on to that same life-changing opportunity, and build a business around that. So yeah, you're an artist, but you also help people learn how to create their own artist in residency. And you can eat off that forever, giving information as we're doing right here. It doesn't cost anything to do the information, and you can get paid as somebody who is an information resource. Mm-hmm. But a lot of musicians and a lot of artists, they just want to create art, and unfortunately, which is their absolute God-given right. But unfortunately, in business, you have to have something that you can turn on and turn off.
Well, I think that's the biggest challenge of people in general. We listen to the narrative of being a starving artist. We listen to the narrative of, I need to get an agent if I'm an athlete. We always listen to the narrative of somebody else needs to help us do what we need to do for ourselves. See, one of the fortunate things for me was I had a great grandfather who really was the man. He was wealthy, and his mindset was all about wealth. But I had an opportunity to go and sell cars. And by me going to sell cars, I saw $50,000 and $60,000 vehicles being sold by me to make a profit. And I did it for 3 or 4 years. It gave me a different kind of mindset in terms of how I feel about my artwork. But the thing that I think many artists forget is, if you're going to build a legacy, somebody has to do the business. That's why show business is called show business. And our artists all over the world, we got to stop allowing ourselves to be like our athletes. Athletes get an agent. The agent spends all his money. He becomes broke. He becomes broke. An artist is really printing money every day. You got to think about it like that. Think about this for a moment. If you could sell a piece of art for $1 a day, and it's $1, you just selling one piece for $1, right? And you sold 10 pieces a day, right? And you do 5 times 10, that's $50, right? What is if you were selling it $10 a day? That's $100 a week, right? I mean that's $50 a week. My point is, we don't think about our art as currency. We think about our art as something to do. You know, a lot of times I go to these art shows, and these guys have their art for $500 and $600, and I have mine for $7, $8, $10, $20,000, and they'll walk over to me and say, "Well, how can you charge that kind of money for your art?" And I'd say to them, I say, the guy who walks in here that's driving a Bentley, you know, Rolls Royce or mansion, big time CEO, he's not going to buy a $500 piece of art, put on his wall, and call his friends and say, "I bought this piece at such and such gallery and I paid $500 for it." Because what he's going to say is that the artist that did it valued it at this price. And if the artist valued it at this price, that is the price that work is probably valued at.
Right. Yep, I totally agree. I see you send me this article, 25 best art neighborhoods in the world. I don't see Philly on here. I'm pissed about that. I also don't see DC or really anywhere on those. They have Austin, which is in the middle of the country, but that's pretty much it. So I'm taking a little bit.
Let me tell you why I said it. Each one of those spaces that are here are white owned, and they're utilized to drive capital to art in those spaces.
Got it.
We don't own any of those. You're talking about spaces that you know of. You Black, right? So you know about those spaces, right?
Yes, sir.
Is in fact that's important to the people that are targeting our artists.
Right.
That's why I said that and you know, that's the kind of research artists don't do. They don't go out, look at the information. Durham is not on there. Durham, North Carolina is not on there. You know, and how can you have all of these places? And I'm not sure if I saw Los Angeles on there.
No, there wasn't.
So there are 3 places where the top artists in the world pretty much are. That's New York City. You just saw the budget, so we already know New York is one of them. Los Angeles, California is another one, and Chicago. Those are your 3 major spaces. And inside of those 3 major spaces, guess what is in those 3 major spaces? African Americans. And I didn't talk about none of the South. I didn't talk about none of the South. Number 4 is going to be Atlanta, Georgia.
Got it.
You got Hong Kong. You got China. These are the places where you're supposed to go to buy Black work.
Got it. I did see Pilsen.
There goes Chicago.
Southwest. So a few years ago. Go ahead, sorry.
They probably have New York up there, but
New York is there, but it's Chelsea, and it's also the hood is Bushwick. Bushwick is the hood, so definitely. But to your point about Los Angeles, there's nothing. There's Seattle, but they did not list anything when it came to Los Angeles. So, and of course, nothing for Durham, nothing for DC.
How can you have it without LA?
That's a good point. And the fact you got College Town, downtown Providence, I'm like, come on, it's downtown Providence. Or to your point, even San Francisco, you would think San Francisco would be listed here too.
especially we're just talking about art neighborhoods in the world. We're not even talking about black. We haven't even cut along the black part. We just cutting where are the art neighborhoods, who owns them, where's the money going, and how.
Right.
Like I had a friend of mine. She's a great artist. I think she's a great artist. I went to her studio, and she had a piece for $700. Then she had a piece for $1,500. Then she had a piece for $2,500. They had a piece for $300. So I asked her. I said, Sharon, no, her name was Deborah. I said, Deborah, I said, why is this piece $2,500 and this piece $1,500? You know what she told me? She told me because she liked those pieces of art. I said, Deborah, it's not about what you like. It's about the skill that you put on that canvas. I say the kind of work that you do, I cannot do. So if all of your work in here was $2,500, it would be worth it. And she said she never thought about. That's what our artists a lot of times do. There was a guy by the name of Willie Nash, and he's gone to the ancestors. And I love Willie Nash's work. I would always go by his table. We would always talk. I was an artist, an up-and-coming artist. He was established. And I used to say in my mind, let me get some of Willie Nash's work. I never got into his work. Okay? Past, this is like 20 years later, his work is being sold for all of this money. Okay? But I had an opportunity to get a lot of his work when he was a young man. And a lot of times, we don't value our artists on that level. We value other artists, but we don't value our artists.
Right. I'd never heard of Willie Nash. So I'm interested in seeing if I see the picture. Okay.
I'm going to tell you something. This is going to,
Yes.
you see that right there?
Mm-hmm.
You see that work right there? He is the originator of that work. When you see artists doing the work,
people. Yeah.
The people with no faces, just the black figure, he was one of the pioneers of that kind of work. When you look at other artists doing this kind of work today, this guy at North Carolina Central University was the first guy who did that. He was right behind Ernie Barnes. A lot of people don't know that. They don't know that because again, there's no museum that shows his work. There's no museum that says Ernie Barnes even existed. If you don't know, you think J.J. Walker actually drew those paintings.
Yeah. I think that one thing is coming clear out of this conversation is that we may have to create some type of virtual installation that allows, so when we have these conversations, so you just told me about Willie Nash. There was another artist you mentioned before besides Ernie Barnes. I'm trying to think of his name.
Charles Wright.
Yes. So those three need to be somewhere. So when we talk, we can go right to our site.
Yeah, because I'm gonna tell you, Charles White, man. And this is what you learn when you're researching artists. Okay, I'm not trying to say they had beef. Okay, but I will say this: Charles White and Ernie Barnes were in arguments over themes, and many people don't understand what I'm saying about themes. Okay, what is a theme? Let's say a girl jumping a rope. That's a theme. Okay, this dude right here, this guy right here, unbelievable. I mean, you go and research. He did lithographs. Look at the detail in his work. Now he was born in, I believe, Cleveland, and then he moved to Los Angeles. And when he moved to Los Angeles, he started teaching in the schools in Los Angeles. Oh, he a bad boy, man. Bad boy. Him and Ernie Barnes were having them problems over them themes, though. And I didn't know as an artist, because I'm just drawing. I didn't even understand what themes were.
Right.
And then later on, as I learned about these two guys and going to DC to see the David Driscoll 200 Centuries of Art, I began to understand really what art is all about. Because I do poetry, I sing, I dance, I do a lot of those things. I mean, I play the piano, I sing, I dance. I call myself an artist. and it doesn't make any difference. It's just stuff that I do. I don't look at art as a specialty. I look at it as a skill that I do. I don't say I'm the best at any of it. I just do what I want to do as an artist because I feel like I was born to be an artist. Now,
Right.
the business side and to get to the galleries and to become a famous artist, that's something for who's writing the narrative. It's kind of like when we talk about basketball and we'll jump up and we'll say LeBron James is the best basketball player of all times. Okay, but
Right.
then you threw Will Chamberlain out. You can't have a conversation without Chamberlain. You can't
Right.
have a
Right.
conversation without Abdul-Jabbar because we have to put them at the same age that they were playing. Those two guys were more imposing. You can't throw Magic out. You can't throw many people. You can't throw the doctor out. But what happens is who writes the narrative tells us who's a great artist. Look at your boy Basquiat. Okay, Basquiat, no shade. I want people to know I love all my artists, but I'm just talking about his life. Basquiat was on drugs, right? Out of his work he did, he enjoyed it. Okay. At the end of the day, he died in 92, right? Okay. I have artwork from elementary school to now. Okay. Can I go back to 1992 and draw another piece of artwork? I can't, right? I can't go back to 1992. So if I got work in 1992, why does my work not stand on the same value of somebody else who's died and gone to the ancestors and I'm still living today? I think that is the challenge that we have as people understanding art. Art is timeless, but we as African Americans or Black Americans, we don't see it that way. That's why Getty bought all of that stuff because they see it as history and they see all of that work. Because remember, how much would you have to pay this guy to not only save all his work, but to keep this work in great shape so that when 2022 got here, you still can grab the pages and actually read the information. You still can look at the stuff and say it is actually great work. And that's the piece that we miss. And that's why we need this show, man. I think this show is awesome.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And what Dr. Kelly was just talking about. And thanks, shout out to Angelique and Derek for tuning in. Appreciate your comments and
Yes.
the love. Yeah, I think that this. I had never thought about collecting our cultural artifacts. I've always known about collecting coins, collecting stamps, and to some degree, books to a certain degree, but never thought about collecting cultural artifacts that talk about art. Not even like it's a poster about so and so show. So this was really interesting to me because this collector intentionally created this archive, which I think many of us could do. There was a sister, I think, in recently, I want to say Buffalo, or it might have been Long Island, New York, who has enough artifacts in her home to create a museum, and she put that up for sale. But outside of those two situations, I just the intentionality of going ahead to create a collection is just genius. At the same time, like, dang, why did I think about that? And why aren't I doing the same thing? And that's also why we have to have the show, because I just don't know enough about the art world. I'm a fan of the show because I want to learn more about art myself, and I want to make sure that there is an intentionality and artwork that my family and I decide to pick up.
Well, I think one of the things that you're going to find out, because you say I'm the artist, I say you the information. And I think that is what needs to be joined in our community. it's not one of those things where this is just happenstance, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I saw you Faith Rango, go back up to Faith Rango.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of our stars. But I want you to also understand that it's no coincidence that we're having this conversation. The reason we're having this conversation really is not only do you want to know more about the art world, us artists want to know more about the art world. You know, I may have given a couple of names that I know, but there are people, um, Beverly Butler, awesome artist. She does quilting, and her quilting looks like the Kendi Wiley's paintings.
Mm.
The way she does her quilting, you know, it's so many levels, and it's so many different artists in the world. We have really been duped to believe that you're gonna be a starving artist
Got it.
because you don't take the time to look at the numbers. If we would, like I said, I was showing you earlier, $10 a piece of art. Think about it for a minute. If you did $10 a piece of art, sold 10 pieces of art a day, that's $100, right? That's
Right.
$500 a week. That's 4 weeks in a month. How much money is that? That's $2,000 a week, right? The $2,000 a week you made, right? What's
Yeah.
$2,000 a week times 54
Right.
weeks?
Right.
We
Got it.
don't do that number because we're so listening to people saying don't utilize your art. And now, and I know you don't want to go into this valley, the cryptocurrency world or the NFT world, which is steadily being pushed on us. We're missing the art world before we get into the NFT world. You
Yeah.
know, and people who are winning in the NFT world, many of them are digital artists. And now
Right.
you're saying that the digital artist, the work that I can do on my computer, is more valuable than the work I can do with my hands. The only reason that you're able to say that is because our artists sometimes live in our space and don't look at the whole entire picture.
You know, I'm gonna this. Thank you for saying that, and this is an example. I think that why I also need to show this article here. I forgot about it. That's when you said what you're saying. Made me think about it. I went back to find it, and I'm gonna reach out to Lori Combine uh, because I think that she could potentially, you know, one of the things that for New York City to do will be to purchase. She has a 20,000 piece collection of artifacts in her home.
In her house.
This woman is 90 years old, and she,
Martin,
yeah,
think about this for a moment.
she says it's 14 museums. That's what she feels like.
She's lived. She's lived.
She's living.
She
Museum.
lived pieces.
Yeah.
That's what one of the things I talk about when I talk to young artists, and you know, I paint with both hands. And so, hey, this young artist, he came to a show I was doing. I was painting with both hands, and he said, "Oh my goodness, you paint with two hands?" I said, "Why don't you paint with two hands?" He never thought. We sometimes don't think about this part of art. Art is your expression. You know, look at this lady, 90 years old, and she has these artifacts. Okay, this is the question. What happens when she leaves the planet?
That's what she's trying to get this done before she goes.
That's what this show ought to be about, man. Finding. You say you're the information. I'm just the artist.
No. You said I'm the information. I agree with you. No, I got you. All right, Brother Kelly, Dr. Kelly, it's been excellent. Appreciate you. This has been a great show. We'll definitely be back next week as there was a bunch of comments from Angelique. Let's see. I like what she said. He said that there's a narrative to what's been deemed valuable. So many famous. That's true. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Read it, but you got to read it. Do weird, ugly work, but it's valued just because somebody said it was brilliant, and everyone after that said it too. I'm gonna give you a classic example. I say I ain't throwing no shade. Who is the artist with Basquiat?
No, Andy Warhol.
Andy Warhol. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of work was Andy Warhol doing?
Portraits.
No, but what kind of work was Andy Warhol
What do you
doing?
mean? Yeah, you gotta be more specific. Remember, I'm a not art person, so
Okay, well, let me go ahead and give it to you. He was doing graphic art.
okay.
He was doing graphic art. The black kid was doing real art.
Right, right.
Okay, now Andy Warhol had a following, right?
Yep.
Okay, when Basquiat, who was just still in New York City doing work, nobody knew who he was. When Basquiat and Warhol got together, all of a sudden, Basquiat's work was great work.
Yes.
And I'm not saying his work is ugly. Don't get me twisted. I love his work. I love his work. Don't get it twisted. But the question becomes, could you do his work?
Basquiat? No. I could try to copy the style.
There have been many people who have copied Basquiat's work and tried to pass it off as Basquiat's work.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing too about art. You know, you can be inspired by someone. And I think that a lot of times, you know, we don't give our children the ability. There's been several kind of paint by hand or paint by number projects. I don't know if anyone has been Black. I'm trying. Oh yeah, there was. I'm sorry. There's these two young men out of Atlanta that were on Shark Tank, and I'm trying to remember did they get a deal or not. But they have an art. They have an art. What do you call it? Curriculum that they do online. The one thing I wish that we would do is focus on Black artists and say, if you could be inspired by so and so and so, here's learn how to da 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 da. And so to your point, I think that so one thing is definitely letting people know about Willie Nash, Charles White. Of course, most people know who Ernie Barnes is, but they don't necessarily know probably outside of what's on Good Times.
But they don't know. But this is the thing. Remember when the Olympics happened?
Mm-hmm.
He was the official artist for the Olympics. There was a whole.
Which Olympics? You said the Olympics happened. Like it's been a lot of Olympics since he was here. So
when the Los Angeles, when they had the Olympics, exactly. I think it was 92, 95. I don't know the date, but I'll find it and I'll bring it back. He was the official artist of the Olympics. I know his daughter, very good friend of mine. She came to North Carolina City to go to the art department. And sometimes I call her and she'll talk about how she grew up in that environment and what it did for her and did to her. These are the stories that people really need to know about. If you actually saw the breadth of his work, you'll be like, I didn't know he did that kind of work. I didn't know he did that kind of work. You know, if you saw the breadth of the kind of work that I was able to do, what you will see is me going through different styles, looking for a style. Yep. And many artists, that's what we do. We go through a style looking for our style. And a lot of times we don't get a chance to do our style because of money puts us in a position that we have to get paid. I think many artists need to just drop that piece and say, I'm gonna go and get to my solution, get to my style, and I'm gonna let the shoe drop where it is, and then begin to understand the business aspect of art, and you can continue to draw because you're looking at it as a whole profession, not a part of a profession. I know we got to go, but thank you, man, for allowing me to come into people's houses today to talk a little bit about art. We got to get Mark Bradford on this show. We got to get these guys out here who are actually making it happen and just have some dialogue and some conversation. Because at the end of the day, I always say, and my last word on the show is always going to be what you're looking for is looking for you. And we are looking for you if you're an artist. We're looking for your work. We want you to come on. We want to discuss how you came up with the idea of the creation that you created for the world. That's how we want to address it. We don't want to address it by, oh, it looks good. Yeah, you did all right. No, we want to do a deep dive into your head and talk to you about what you were thinking. Because when you leave this planet, the narrative is going to be written by somebody else.
Right.
narrative for Basquiat is always written by somebody else. Okay, the narrative for Warhol and Van Gogh and Michelangelo and all these guys, Picasso, is written by somebody else. What we want to do is listen to what your narrative is, get that narrative, recorded. So 20, 30 years from now, when this is reviewed, somebody can say, oh yeah, man, that black artist right there, his mindset was this, because I heard him from his voice, what he was thinking and how he came up with this creation.
Yep. There it is.
Man, had a ball.
Hey, thank you, Brother Kelly. Dr. Kelly, we appreciate you. Keep safe down there in North Carolina. We'll be back next week, same time, same bat channel.